The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council stretched high above like a frozen ocean wave. Inside, hundreds of alien beings sat in circular rows, their strange voices mixing together in a symphony of clicks, hisses, and electronic beeps. The air smelled like ozone, and something vaguely metallic that made human noses wrinkle. Ambassador Kim Hana walked slowly to the center platform, her simple black suit looking plain next to the colorful scales, feathers, and glowing armor of the other delegates. Every step echoed in the vast chamber. She could feel thousands of alien eyes watching her, and not in a friendly way. "So this is what Earth sends us," rumbled Admiral Thexmore from his floating throne. The Kronan leader was massive, easily 3 meters tall, with dark blue skin that looked like polished stone. His 4 yellow eyes glowed as he leaned forward. "One small human to represent your entire world." Ripples of what could only be described as alien laughter filled the chamber. The snake-like Vorthak delegates swayed their heads and made sharp hissing sounds. The bug-like Zelani clicked their mandibles so loudly it sounded like typewriters gone mad. Even the peaceful-looking Etherians, with their pale blue skin and large eyes, seemed to be hiding smiles behind their long fingers. Hana placed her hands behind her back and stood perfectly still. She had practiced this moment 1,000 times, in front of mirrors back on Earth. Admiral Thexmore honored delegates. Earth is grateful for the opportunity to contribute to galactic peace. Contribute? The word came out like a growl from somewhere in the alien crowd. What could humans possibly contribute to real warfare? A holographic display suddenly lit up the center of the chamber, showing Earth's military records. The numbers were embarrassing. 300 ships, all of them small. Weapons that used simple explosives and metal bullets. No energy shields, no plasma cannons, no faster-than-light missiles. By galactic standards, humans were fighting with sticks and rocks. Look at this. Admiral Thexmore waved one of his 4 arms at the display. Chemical rockets, kinetic weapons. They still use nuclear fusion for power. My personal shuttle has better technology than their entire fleet. More laughter echoed through the chamber. Someone in the back made a comment that the translator couldn't quite handle, but it sounded insulting in any language. Hana felt her cheeks burn, but she kept her expression calm. This was all part of the plan, she reminded herself. Let them laugh. Let them think humans were weak and stupid. Every insult, every dismissive gesture, every condescending smile was exactly what Earth had hoped for. "We understand our limitations," she said quietly, "but Earth stands ready to serve in whatever capacity the Council deems appropriate." Appropriate? Thexmore's laugh was like rocks grinding together. "Yes, I think we have the perfect job for humanity. You can guard the empty space on the outer rim while real warriors handle the coming war. Consider it training for your primitive species." The chamber filled with approval from the alien delegates. They were already discussing how to divide up the important battles among themselves, treating the humans like children who needed to be kept busy with simple tasks. As the session ended and the aliens began filing out, still chuckling about Earth's pathetic military, Hana touched a small device on her wrist. The message was short, sent in an old Korean code that no alien translator would ever crack. Phase 1 complete. They bought it completely, deep in space, in facilities hidden where no alien scanner would ever find them. That message was received with knowing smiles. The greatest military deception in galactic history was proceeding exactly as planned. Captain Lee Minho stared at the encrypted message on his personal screen, reading it for the 3rd time. The orders made no sense. Why would Earth Command want him to reroute shipping lanes through the dead zones of human space? And what was this about special cargo transports that weren't on any official registry? Captain. His alien liaison officer, Krixtal, chittered nervously from across the bridge. The Zelani's compound eyes were focused on the tactical display, where dozens of unidentified ships were moving through what should have been empty space. "These vessels do not match any configurations in your military database." Minho quickly closed his personal screen and walked over to the main display. Even he had to admit it looked strange. Massive ships, easily twice the size of anything in Earth's official fleet, were gliding silently through the outer systems. Their hulls were smooth and dark, with no visible weapon ports or identification markings. "Training exercises," Minho said, hoping his voice sounded more confident than he felt. "You know how Earth Defense Force likes to keep us sharp, always running drills and simulations." Krixtal's mandibles clicked together in what Minho had learned was the Zelani equivalent of doubt. "These ships are quite large for training vessels, Captain, and their energy signatures are unusual." That was putting it mildly. The readings coming from those mystery ships were unlike anything Minho had seen in his 15 years of service. Power outputs that seemed impossible for vessels of their size, propulsion systems that left no exhaust trail, and something else that made his instruments flicker and jump whenever they tried to get a solid lock. "Sir," Lieutenant Park Ji-won called from the communications station, "we're getting reports from other human ships in the area. Strange sensor blackouts, navigation systems going haywire. The Cronins sent 3 scout ships to investigate yesterday, and all of them had to turn back after their computers started malfunctioning." Minho nodded as if this was perfectly normal, but inside his mind was racing. What was Earth really doing out here? These weren't training exercises, and those definitely weren't standard military transports. Something big was happening, something that went way beyond his security clearance. The situation got even stranger when Dr. Park Soo-min arrived at the orbital research station. She was supposed to be giving a presentation about human terraforming technology to a group of visiting alien scientists. Everything was going smoothly until she mentioned something about Project Titan's atmospheric processors. The alien scientists. He immediately perked up. Project Titan wasn't in any of the public research files they'd been given access to. Before they could ask questions, Colonel Yu Jinwoo appeared as if from nowhere and quickly escorted Dr. Park away from the group. "Apologies," the colonel said with a polite smile. Dr. Park misspoke. She was referring to our Titan-based terraforming initiative, a small-scale farming project. Nothing that would interest advanced civilizations like yourselves. But the damage was done. The aliens exchanged glances, their various forms of communication buzzing with curiosity. What was Project Titan? Why was it classified? And why did the humans seem so nervous about it? Later that week, a Cronin deep space probe attempted to scan what appeared to be a simple mining operation in the asteroid belt. The probe's sensors immediately went dead. When they sent a second probe, the same thing happened. A third probe was destroyed by what the Cronins reported as catastrophic system failures. "Equipment malfunction," the human authorities explained. "Old mining gear interferes with sophisticated alien electronics. We apologize for any inconvenience." But the excuses were getting thinner. Alien intelligence services began comparing notes, and a disturbing picture started to emerge. Human space was full of activities that didn't match their supposed technological level. Ships that shouldn't exist, energy readings that defied explanation, and research projects that were hidden behind layers of bureaucratic doublespeak. The most unsettling part was how calm the humans remained about everything. When questioned, they always had reasonable explanations. When pressed for details, they politely redirected conversations to safer topics. It was as if they'd prepared for every possible question in advance. Deep in the shadows of human space, installations that looked like ordinary industrial facilities from a distance hummed with power that could light up small moons. The galaxy's intelligence networks were starting to notice, but they couldn't quite figure out what they were seeing. The deception was beginning to crack, but like all the best lies, it was cracking very slowly and very carefully, exactly as Earth had planned. The first system fell in less than 6 hours. The Cronin warfleet swept through the rebel colony at Proxima 7 like a dark storm, their massive battleships unleashing waves of plasma fire that turned defensive stations into glowing debris. Admiral Thexmore watched from his command ship as entire cities vanished in brilliant flashes of light. "Pathetic," he rumbled to his officers. The rebels thought their little alliance could stand against the might of the Cronin Empire. "Send word to the Council. The Outer Rim will be pacified within a standard month." News of the devastating attack spread across the galaxy's communication networks within hours. The rebellion, made up of smaller species who had dared to challenge Cronin authority, was being crushed exactly as everyone had predicted. Their ships were older, their weapons weaker, and their soldiers outnumbered 50-1. But something strange happened at the second system. The rebels fought harder than expected, using tactics that seemed almost desperate but surprisingly effective. What should have been another 6-hour victory turned into a 3-day battle. The Cronans still won, but they lost more ships than they'd planned. By the fourth system, the pattern was clear. Each battle was getting longer, bloodier, and more expensive. The rebels were learning, adapting, fighting with a fury that surprised even their own leaders. What had started as a quick military operation was turning into a real war. That's when the Galactic Council called its emergency session. The massive crystal chamber filled with worried alien delegates, their various forms of communication creating a nervous buzz that made the air itself seem tense. "The situation is more serious than we anticipated," announced Councillor Vorthak, his scales showing stress patterns that made him look almost grey. "All member species must contribute military assets to support the Cronan Empire's peacekeeping efforts. One by one, the alien civilizations pledged their forces. The Etherians offered their fast scout ships and excellent pilots. The Zelani promised their heavy mining vessels, converted for military use. Even the peaceful Altarians agreed to provide medical support and supply ships. Then all eyes turned to the human delegation. Ambassador Kim Hana stood slowly, her simple clothing making her look small and fragile among the towering aliens around her. "Earth recognizes the gravity of the situation," she said clearly. "We are prepared to contribute what we can to restore galactic peace." The chamber fell silent, waiting to hear what the primitive humans could possibly offer. "We can provide a squadron of 12 ships under the command of Commander Jang Hyun," Hana continued. "These vessels represent a significant portion of our deep space capability, but we believe they can serve the Council's needs. 12 ships. Out of humanity's entire fleet of 300, they were offering 12 outdated vessels." The silence in the chamber was deafening, broken only by what sounded suspiciously like alien snickering. Admiral Thexmore's 4 eyes glowed with barely concealed contempt. 12 ships. That's your contribution to a galactic war. We must keep the majority of our fleet in Sol system for defensive purposes, Hana replied apologetically. Our homeworld requires protection, and our ships are not as advanced as those of other species. We wouldn't want to burden the war effort with vessels that might prove more liability than asset. The alien delegates exchanged glances that clearly said what they were all thinking. 12 primitive human ships wouldn't make any difference. In a war involving thousands of advanced alien vessels, it was barely worth the fuel required to transport them to the battle zones. "Very well," Thexmore said dismissively. "Your token force will be assigned to patrol duties in the rear areas. Try not to get in the way of real warships." As the session ended and the aliens began discussing their real military strategies, Commander Jang Hyun received his orders in the human embassy's secure communication room. The message was brief, but loaded with meaning that only another human would understand. Proceed to designated coordinates. Observe everything. Record all tactical data. Phase 2. Surveillance protocols are now active. Report directly to Himalayan. Command. Hyun nodded to his aide, Lieutenant Kim Sora. "Prep the squadron. We're going to war." "All 12 ships, sir?" "All 12 visible ships," Hyun corrected with a slight smile. "The others will follow at a safe distance." As the human squadron departed Earth orbit, their simple hulls and basic weapon systems made them look like antiques among the sleek alien warships. But hidden deep within each vessel were the most sophisticated sensor arrays and communication systems humanity had ever built. Their mission had nothing to do with fighting. They were there to watch, learn, and gather intelligence on every aspect of galactic warfare. Every weapon fired, every tactical maneuver, every strategic decision would be recorded and analyzed by the finest military minds on Earth. The galaxy thought it was getting 12 obsolete patrol ships. What it was really getting was the most comprehensive military intelligence operation in human history. 5 kilometers beneath the snow-covered peaks of the Himalayas, General Choi Dae-hyun walked through corridors that officially didn't exist. The facility, known only as the Forge, stretched for miles in every direction, carved from solid rock and shielded by technology that made it invisible to every known form of detection. The walls hummed with power that could light up entire cities. Holographic displays showed real-time feeds from across the galaxy, tracking every movement of every fleet involved in the current war. But this wasn't just a command center. This was the heart of the greatest deception in human history. "General," Colonel Kim Sora approached with a datapad in her hands, "our observers in the war zone are sending back excellent intelligence. We now have complete tactical profiles on Kronan battle formations, weapon systems, and command protocols." Daehyun nodded, his eyes never leaving the massive central display that showed the Galactic War's progress. Red dots marked Kronan forces, blue showed the rebels, and tiny green specks represented the 12 human ships that everyone thought were Earth's only contribution to the conflict. 32 years, he said quietly. 32 years since we made first contact, and they still think we're primitive savages playing with chemical rockets. The truth was so much more complex. When humanity's first deep space probe had encountered an alien vessel near Alpha Centauri, Earth's leaders had faced a terrible realization. They were not alone in the universe, and they were hopelessly outgunned. The alien ship had technology. That was centuries ahead of anything humans possessed. Faster than light travel, energy weapons, force fields that could stop nuclear weapons. If these aliens decided humanity was a threat, Earth would be defenseless. But instead of panicking, Earth's greatest minds had seen an opportunity. "Show them what they expect to see," had been the directive from the secret Global Defense Council. "Let them think we're weak while we learn everything we can about them." What followed was the most carefully orchestrated intelligence operation in human history. Every interaction with alien civilizations was planned down to the smallest detail. Every piece of technology humans revealed was chosen to make them appear decades behind galactic standards. While alien observers watched humans struggling with fusion rockets, the real human fleet was being built in facilities like this one, using principles that the galaxy had either forgotten or never discovered. While aliens laughed at human kinetic weapons, human scientists were unlocking the secrets of manipulating space and time itself. "The archaeological sites were brilliant," Colonel Kim continued, pulling up another display, "convincing the aliens that we only discovered faster-than-light travel by accident through ancient alien ruins. They never suspected we reverse-engineered their own technology and improved it. The fake ruins had been humanity's masterstroke. Scattered across Earth's solar system, they told a story of primitive humans stumbling across abandoned alien technology. The galaxy's archaeological community had accepted the findings without question, which explained how such a backward species had developed FTL travel so quickly. "Sir," a technician called from across the command center, "we're receiving transmission from Deep Space Monitoring Station 7. They've detected massive energy signatures from the Andromeda construction sites." Daehyun smiled. The Andromeda facilities were humanity's crown jewel, massive shipyards hidden in the space between galaxies where no alien would ever think to look. For 20 years, human engineers had been building ships there using technology that made current galactic standards look like Stone Age tools. "How many vessels are now operational?" he asked. "Over 2,000, sir. The new gravitational manipulation drives are performing beyond specifications. We can deploy a full battle fleet anywhere in the galaxy within 6 hours. 2,000 ships. The aliens thought humanity possessed 300 primitive vessels, not knowing that Earth's real fleet outnumbered most galactic navies. But numbers weren't even the real advantage. "What's the status on Project Titan?" Daehyun asked. Colonel Kim's expression grew serious. "The temporal manipulation experiments have exceeded all expectations. We can now create localized time distortion, fields large enough to affect capital ships. The physics department says we're essentially weaponizing time itself. Around them, the facility buzzed with activity that would have terrified the galaxy's greatest military minds. Weapons that operated outside normal spacetime, propulsion systems that treated the laws of physics as suggestions rather than absolute, rules and defensive technologies that could make entire fleets simply disappear from reality. The most incredible part was how long they'd maintained the deception. Every human who interacted with aliens was carefully trained and monitored. Every piece of primitive technology was actually sophisticated enough to fool advanced alien sensors while appearing hopelessly outdated. "The war is accelerating our timeline," Daehyun observed, watching as Kronan forces push deeper into rebel territory. "How long before we're ready for full deployment?" "Phase 3 can be initiated within 72 hours, sir. All fleet commanders are standing by for the Revelation Protocol." Daehyun nodded slowly. For over 3 decades, humanity had been the galaxy's best-kept secret, hiding in plain sight while building the most advanced military force in known space. Soon, very soon, the galaxy would learn what humans were really capable of. The greatest magic trick in history was about to reach its finale, and the audience had no idea what they were about to see. Ambassador Silandra's hands trembled as she walked through the empty corridors of the human embassy. The graceful Etherian had always prided herself on maintaining perfect composure, but desperation had stripped away all pretense. Her pale blue skin had taken on an almost grey tint, and her large eyes were rimmed with the equivalent of tears. The embassy was smaller than those of other galactic powers, tucked away in a quiet section of the diplomatic quarter. The humans had always kept a low profile, and their building reflected that philosophy. Simple, functional, unremarkable, nothing like the towering spires of the Kronan embassy or the crystal domes of the Zelani compound. "Ambassador Kim will see you now," said the human aide, a young woman whose calm demeanor seemed almost surreal given the circumstances. How could these people remain so composed when the galaxy was tearing itself apart? Hana's office was equally modest, with simple furniture and a single holographic display showing news feeds from the war zones. The human ambassador looked up from her work, with the same polite smile she'd worn during every council session, as if they were discussing trade agreements rather than the extinction of entire species. "Please, sit," Hana said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. "I understand you have urgent matters to discuss." Silandra collapsed into the chair, her usual grace abandoned. "Ambassador Kim, I'm not here in any official capacity. What I'm about to say could be considered treason by the Galactic Council, I see." Hana's expression didn't change, but she quietly activated a privacy field around the room. "Please speak freely. My people are dying." The words came out in a rush, 20 years of diplomatic training forgotten. "The Kronans have pushed us back to our last stronghold at Kepler 442b. Our children, our elderly, our entire civilization is trapped on that world. We have maybe 72 hours before their final assault." Hana nodded sympathetically. "The Council has assigned support forces to assist with the evacuation. Surely the evacuation ships won't arrive in time." Silandra's voice cracked. "The Kronans know this. They're deliberately timing their attack to prevent any rescue. They want to make an example of us, to show other species what happens when you resist their authority." The room fell silent, except for the soft hum of the embassy's life support systems. Outside, the diplomatic quarter continued its usual business, aliens from dozens of species going about their daily routines, unaware that an entire civilization was hours away from extinction. "What exactly are you asking of us?" Hana asked carefully. Silandra leaned forward, her eyes pleading. "There are rumors, Ambassador, whispers in the intelligence networks, stories about human activities that don't match your public capabilities, ships that appear and disappear without explanation, energy signatures that shouldn't be possible with your supposed technology level." Hana's expression remained perfectly neutral, but something flickered in her eyes for just a moment. "I know it sounds insane," Silandra continued, her words tumbling over each other. "But if there's even a chance that humanity has been hiding advanced capabilities, if there's any possibility that you could help us, I'm begging you to consider it. We're not asking you to win the war for us. We just need enough time to evacuate our people." The silence stretched between them like a physical thing. Hana stared at the Etherian ambassador for what felt like an eternity, weighing options that Silandra couldn't even guess at. Finally, Hana reached for her desk communicator, but instead of using the standard diplomatic channels, she switched to what appeared to be a personal device. When she spoke, it was in rapid Korean, her voice carrying an urgency that hadn't been there moments before. "This is Alpha 77, she said. "Request immediate authorization for Phase 3. Full exposure protocol. The Etherians are facing extinction, and our timeline has been compromised." Silandra didn't understand the words, but the tone was unmistakable. This wasn't a routine diplomatic communication. This was someone calling in a favor from very high up the chain of command. The response came within seconds, also in Korean, but even through the alien language, Silandra could hear the weight of authority in the voice on the other end. "Authorized," came the reply. "Heaven's Gate is opening. All units are cleared for full revelation. Operation Lazarus is now active." Hana set down the communicator and looked directly at Silandra. For the first time since the Etherian had known hers, the human ambassador's carefully maintained facade cracked slightly. "Ambassador Silandra," she said quietly, "I want you to send a message to your people on Kepler 442b. Tell them to hold their positions for exactly 18 hours. Tell them that help is coming and that they should not surrender under any circumstances. But the human fleet is not what it appears to be." Hana stood up, her entire demeanor shifting from diplomatic politeness to something that looked almost predatory. "Neither is humanity. In 18 hours, your people will understand why the galaxy should never underestimate a species that appears weak." Silandra felt a chill run down her spine. There was something in the human's voice, a confidence that seemed completely at odds with humanity's supposed limitations. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, her people might survive after all. But she had no idea that she had just witnessed the moment when humanity decided to reveal the greatest military secret in galactic history. Admiral Thexmore floated in his command chair aboard the massive Kronan flagship Dominion, watching the final preparations for what would be the war's most decisive battle. 800 of the Empire's finest warships surrounded the B. "Kepler? All battle groups are in position, Admiral. The rebels have nowhere to run. Our sensors show approximately 200 defending ships, mostly outdated civilian vessels converted for military use. They won't last an hour against our forces." Thexmore's mandibles clicked together in what passed for Kronan laughter. This final battle would end the rebellion once and for all, and send a clear message to any other species thinking of challenging the Empire's authority. The Etherians and their allies had chosen extinction over surrender, and he was happy to accommodate them. "Begin the final approach," he ordered. "I want this finished before the galactic news networks lose interest." But as the Kronan fleet moved toward the planet, something impossible began to happen. Space itself seemed to shimmer and twist, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. The ship's sensors started registering readings that made no sense, gravitational distortions that violated everything they knew about physics. "Admiral," his science officer called out, his voice tight with confusion, "we're detecting massive spatial anomalies throughout the system, energy signatures unlike anything in our databases." Before Thexmore could respond, reality tore open. It started as small rifts in space, dark wounds against the starfield that hurt to look at directly. Then the wounds widened, revealing something that made even veteran Kronan warriors step back from their stations in shock. Ships emerged from what could only be described as tears in the fabric of space-time itself. But these weren't the primitive, human vessels that everyone had seen in the intelligence reports. These were monsters of metal and energy, sleek predators that dwarfed even the largest Kronan dreadnoughts. The first ship to fully emerge was easily twice the size of the Dominion, its hull a seamless black surface that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange patterns of energy danced across its surface, creating geometric designs that shifted and flowed like living things. "Impossible," Thexmore whispered, his massive frame actually trembling as more ships appeared. Dozens of them, then hundreds, materializing from dimensional rifts that shouldn't exist. Where did they come from? How are they masking their approach from our sensors? His communications officer's voice cracked as he spoke. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission. It's coming from the largest vessel." The main screen flickered to life, showing a human face that was somehow both ordinary and terrifying. The man wore a simple military uniform with no elaborate decorations, but his eyes held the calm confidence of someone who had never known defeat. "This is Admiral Bay Minjun of the Terran Defense Force," the human said in perfect Kronan, his accent flawless despite speaking an alien language. "You have 30 minutes to withdraw all forces from Coalition space and return to your own territory." The bridge of the Dominion fell completely silent. 800 Kronan warships, the most powerful military force in the galaxy, were being ordered to retreat by a species that supposedly still used chemical rockets and metal bullets. Thexmore found his voice, though it came out as more of a snarl than words. "Human, your species possesses barely 300 primitive vessels. What you're showing us is impossible. These ships don't exist in any intelligence database." "Our database is clearly incomplete," Admiral Bay replied, with a slight smile that somehow managed to be both polite and threatening. "I'm updating it now. You have 29 minutes remaining." Around the Kronan fleet, more human vessels continued to appear. Not just ships, but entire battle formations that moved with precision that spoke volumes about their crew's training and experience. These weren't hastily converted civilian craft or outdated patrol boats. These were purpose-built instruments of war, designed by minds that understood combat in ways the galaxy had never imagined. "This is a trick," Thexmore declared, though his voice lacked conviction. "Some kind of holographic deception. Humans don't possess technology like this." "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, his voice barely above a whisper, "the energy. Readings are real. These ships are generating power outputs that exceed our theoretical maximums. And, sir, they're not showing up on our targeting systems properly. It's like they're not entirely in normal space." For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Thexmore felt something he had never experienced before: genuine fear. Not just concern about losing a battle, but the primal terror of realizing that everything he thought he knew about the universe was wrong. "Impossible," he repeated, but the word sounded hollow even to his own ears. The human admiral's expression remained unchanged. "You have 27 minutes remaining. I suggest you use them wisely. This is your only warning." The transmission ended, leaving the Kronan fleet surrounded by ships that shouldn't exist, commanded by a species that had just revealed themselves to be far more dangerous than anyone had ever imagined. In the depths of space, humanity's greatest secret was finally about to be unleashed. The 30 minutes passed like a slow death. Admiral Thexmore stood rigid on his command bridge, surrounded by officers who looked like they'd seen ghosts. The impossible human fleet waited patiently in perfect formation, their dark ships humming with power that made the Dominion's sensors. "Scream warnings, Admiral," his communications officer whispered. "They're requesting our response." Thexmore's pride warred with a growing sense of dread in his chest. The Kronan Empire had never retreated from anyone. His ancestors had conquered half the galaxy through strength and determination. He would not be the first admiral to run from a handful of primitive humans, no matter how advanced their ships appeared to be. "Tell them," he growled, his voice carrying across the silent bridge, "that the Kronan Empire does not yield to threats from inferior species." The response came immediately, spoken in that same calm, terrifying tone. "Understood, Admiral. Heaven's Gate defense protocol is now active. All coalition forces maintain safe distance." What happened next would be studied by military academicians for centuries, assuming there were any academies left to study it. The human ship Sejong fired first, but calling it firing was like calling a hurricane a gentle breeze. Instead of energy beams or projectile weapons, something invisible reached out across space and simply touched 3 Kronan battlecruisers. The massive warships, each one capable of reducing planets to rubble, began to crumple like paper balls. Not from external force, but from within. Their own gravity was being turned against them, creating localized fields so intense that the ships' hulls compressed until they were barely the size of shuttlecraft. "What in the void was that?" Thexmore screamed, but his science officer could only stare at readings that made no sense. "Time distortion," his science officer whispered, the words barely audible. "They're manipulating temporal fields. That's impossible. The energy requirements alone would need the output of a star." But the humans weren't finished. Ships throughout. Their fleet began firing weapons that operated on principles the galaxy had never seen. Quantum phase torpedoes passed through Kronan shields like they were made of mist, then exploded inside the enemy hulls with surgical precision. Each detonation was calculated to disable rather than destroy, leaving the ships helpless, but their crews alive. The new Soul demonstrated gravitational manipulation on a scale that defied belief, creating artificial gravity wells that grabbed entire squadrons of Kronan fighters and held them motionless in space. The tiny ships struggled like insects in amber, their engines screaming at maximum power but unable to move even a meter. "This violates everything we know about physics," Thexmore's tactical officer reported, his voice cracking with strain. "Gravitational. Fields that precise should require technology the size of moons, not something that fits on a single ship." The most terrifying demonstration came from the human vessel Docto. It simply made a Kronan heavy cruiser disappear. Not destroyed. Not disabled, but gone, as if it had never existed. Sensors showed empty space where a 1,000-meter warship had been floating seconds before. "Where did it go?" someone screamed from across the bridge. The answer came from the human fleet's communications. "Your vessel has been placed in temporal suspension. The crew is unharmed but exists in a bubble where time moves so slowly that they will experience only minutes while years pass in normal space. They can be retrieved when this conflict ends." Throughout the Kepler system, the most powerful military force in galactic history was being systematically dismantled by weapons that operated outside the known laws of physics. Ships that had conquered dozens of worlds were being swatted aside like annoying insects. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of the entire engagement was how calm the humans remained. There was no anger in their voices, no excitement or bloodlust. They spoke like technicians solving a routine problem, discussing the complete destruction of the Kronan fleet as if they were repairing a broken machine. "Admiral Thexmore," came Admiral Bay's voice over the communication system, "your fleet has been neutralized. We could have destroyed every ship and killed every crew member, but we chose not to. Consider this a demonstration of mercy rather than weakness." Thexmore looked around his bridge at displays showing the complete devastation of his forces. 800 of the Empire's finest warships, reduced to floating scrap or trapped in impossible prison of distorted time and space. All accomplished in less than 12 minutes without a single human casualty. "Impossible," he whispered one final time, but now the word carried a different meaning. Not disbelief, but the terrible understanding that humanity had just revealed capabilities that made every other military force in the galaxy obsolete. The war was over, and it had ended not with a battle, but with a lesson in just how much the galaxy had underestimated the quiet species from the small blue planet. The news spread across the galaxy faster than light itself, carried by quantum communication networks that connected every major world. Within 6 hours of the Kepler incident, as historians would later name it, emergency sessions were being called on planets thousands of light-years apart. On the Zelani homeworld, Queen Vexthara watched the battle recordings for the 5th time, her compound eyes unable to process what she was seeing. "Play it again," she clicked to her military advisors. "Show me how they made an entire cruiser disappear." The recording replayed in slow motion, but it didn't help. One moment, a Kronan heavy cruiser was firing its weapons. The next moment, there was simply empty space. No explosion, no debris, no energy discharge. The ship had been erased from reality as if it had never existed. "Your Majesty," her chief scientist chittered nervously, "our best theoretical physicists say this technology shouldn't be possible. The energy requirements alone would need the output of multiple stars." "Then our physicists are wrong," the Queen snapped, her mandibles clacking with agitation, "because we just watched it happen." Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. On the crystal world of Ethereal Prime, President Silandra stood before her emergency council, no longer the desperate refugee who had begged for human help. "Send immediate word to all our colonies," she ordered. "Formal alliance negotiations with Earth are our highest priority." The Vorthak Confederation held their own crisis meeting in the shadowy depths of their underground cities. Supreme Leader. Haskemore, his scales dark with worry, addressed his military commanders. "How long have the humans possessed these capabilities?" "Unknown, Supreme Leader," came the reply from his intelligence chief. "Our analysis suggests they've been hiding their true strength since first contact. 30 years of deception, perfectly." Executed. 30 years. Haskmore's hood flared in shock. They've been watching us, studying us, planning for 3 decades while we treated them like primitive children. The implications hit different species in different ways. The proud Altarians, known for their advanced sciences, discovered that their greatest theoretical breakthroughs were apparently child's play compared to human achievements. Their top researchers began suffering what their doctors called intellectual vertigo. The psychological shock of realizing their life's work was obsolete. But it was the reactions of military leaders across the galaxy that truly showed how completely the balance of power had shifted. General Zoktar of the Hegemony Defense Force stared at casualty reports that made no sense. 800 Kronan warships neutralized in 12 minutes with 0 human losses? Confirmed, General, his aide replied. Most of the Kronan ships are still intact, just disabled. The humans could have destroyed them all but chose not to. That detail terrified military minds more than any display of destructive power could have. It wasn't just that humans had weapons beyond galactic understanding. It was that they had such precise control over those weapons that they could disable entire fleets without killing anyone. The Galactic Council called an emergency session within 18 hours, but the massive crystal chamber that had once echoed with dismissive laughter now felt like a tomb. Species that had casually mocked human primitiveness just days ago now spoke in hushed whispers about the sleeping giant and the hidden empire. Ambassador Kim Hana walked to the center platform, but this time her steps carried a weight that made the air itself seem heavier. Gone was the apologetic demeanor and careful politeness. The human who stood before them now moved with the quiet confidence of someone who held all the cards. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber, "I believe some explanations are in order." The silence was absolute. Aliens who had built civilizations spanning entire star systems sat like schoolchildren waiting for a teacher to speak. "For 32 years, Hana continued, humanity has observed your conflicts, studied your methods, and learned from your mistakes. While you saw us as primitive newcomers struggling with basic technology, we were developing capabilities that your science declared impossible." She gestured, and a holographic display filled the chamber, showing not the 300 obsolete ships in humanity's public fleet records, but thousands of vessels with capabilities that dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever produced. "The human species approaches problems differently than most civilizations," she explained. "While you perfected existing technologies, we questioned the fundamental assumptions behind those technologies. While you fought wars over territory and resources, we studied war itself." Councillor Vorthak, his scales now pale grey with fear, managed to speak. What do you want from us?" Hana's smile was neither cruel nor kind. It was simply the expression of someone who had just revealed that they'd been holding all the power all along. "The same thing we've always wanted," she replied. "Peace, prosperity, and the freedom to explore the universe alongside our galactic neighbors. The only difference is that now you understand the consequences of threatening those goals." The message was clear without being spoken aloud. Humanity didn't want to conquer the galaxy. They wanted to protect it. But they had just demonstrated that they possessed the power to reshape galactic civilization with a thought. The age of human weakness was over, replaced by an era where Earth's quiet diplomats spoke with the authority of gods. 6 months after, the galaxy learned to fear humanity. Captain Lee Minho stood on the bridge of his new command, the New Soul, and marveled at how completely everything had changed. Through the massive viewport, he could see a sight that would have been impossible just a year ago. A mixed fleet of human and alien vessels working together to patrol what was once the most contested region of space. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving another formal alliance request. This time it's from the hegemony worlds." Minho nodded without surprise. That made 17 species in the past month alone, all desperately seeking Earth's protection and friendship. The same civilizations that had laughed at humanity's primitive technology were now offering trade deals, research partnerships, and military cooperation agreements. "Standard response," he ordered. "Forward it." The truth was, Piracy had nearly vanished from known space. Word had spread quickly through the criminal underworld about what happened to those who threatened the peace that humanity now guaranteed. A few pirate fleets had tested Earth's resolve. In the early days after the revelation, they had simply disappeared, their ships found later floating empty in space with their crews relocated to prison colonies they couldn't even pronounce the names of. "Set course for the distress signal," Minho ordered. "Full speed." The new soul moved through space with a grace that still amazed him. The ship's gravitational drives didn't push against space-time like traditional engines, but rather convinced space-time that the ship was already where it wanted to be. The result was movement that was both faster than light and completely smooth, without the violent acceleration that made most alien vessels uncomfortable to travel in. They arrived at the convoy in less than an hour, finding 3 merchant ships under attack by a small fleet of raiders. The pirates were using old Cronan military hardware, probably stolen during the chaos that followed Admiral Thexmore's defeat. "Open a channel to the attacking vessels," Minho ordered. The pirate leader's face appeared on screen, a scarred alien, whose species Minho didn't recognize. "Human vessel, this is not your concern. These ships carry valuable cargo that—" "You have 30 seconds to disengage and leave this system," Minho interrupted, his voice carrying the quiet authority that humans had become known for. "This is your only warning." The pirate laughed, showing teeth filed to sharp points. "1 human ship against 6 of ours? I don't think so." Minho sighed. "Fire a demonstration shot." The new Soul's weapons officer activated a single quantum phase torpedo, but instead of targeting the pirate ships, he aimed it at a nearby asteroid. The rock, roughly the size of a city block, simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed or vaporized, but erased from reality, as if it had never been there. The laughter died on the pirate's lips. "You now have 15 seconds, Minho said calmly. The pirate fleet scattered like leaves in a hurricane, their ships jumping to hyperspace so quickly that they left sensor ghosts behind. The merchant convoy sent grateful messages in a dozen different languages, all expressing the same sentiment. "Thank you for keeping us safe." As the new Soul resumed its patrol route, Lieutenant Park approached with a data pad. "Sir, intelligence reports that pirate activity in this entire sector has dropped by 93% since we began regular patrols." "Good," Minho replied, settling back into his command chair. "Fear is a powerful teacher. On Earth, in the depths of the Himalayan facility, General Choi Daehyun watched similar reports flowing in from across the galaxy. Trade routes that had been dangerous for centuries were now safe. Conflicts that had simmered for decades were being resolved through negotiation rather than warfare. Species that had been enemies for generations were finding common ground in their shared desire to avoid humanity's displeasure. "It's working better than we ever imagined," Colonel Kim Sora reported. "Galactic crime rates are at historic lows. Military conflicts have decreased by 80%. Even the Cronan Empire has formally disbanded its expansion fleet and is focusing on internal development." Daehyun nodded, his eyes on the massive display that showed human influence spreading across the galaxy like ripples in a pond, not through conquest or colonization, but through the simple understanding that Earth's protection came with certain expectations of behavior. The galaxy had learned a fundamental truth about humanity. They didn't need to be feared because they were cruel, but because they were patient. For 30 years, humans had watched and waited, learning everything they could about their neighbors, while revealing nothing about themselves. Now, with their true capabilities revealed, that patience had become the foundation of galactic peace. Admiral Thexmore, released from his temporal prison and now serving as a military consultant to the new Cronan civilian government, had summed it up best in his recent memoir. "Humans taught us that the most dangerous predator is not the one that roars the loudest, but the one that convinces everyone else it's not a predator at all. The age of human deception was over, but the age of human dominance had just begun, and the galaxy, whether it liked it or not, was finally at peace.